2026, and it has been a great holiday season for myself. I hope that everyone else had a wonderful year as well and topped it off with some great celebrations with family, friends throughout Christmas and for New Year's. I hope that everybody, sorry, back here. There we go. I don't know what happened to the screen there. It's, obviously the YouTube gremlins are back. But in any event, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you did have a very Merry Christmas. I hope that you celebrated the New Year's, but did so in a safe and responsible manner. It's always important to look at this time of year, not just at the year ahead, but also at the year that's behind us. We need to, of course, learn from the past so we can correct and not repeat it in the future. With that said, we know that there has been a lot of strife and a lot of conflict around the world in 2025. And with any luck, we'll see some peace come for 2026. But again, it is going to be a challenge with the different peace talks that are on, having so many caveats that need to be met before ceasefires or other issues really kick in to make that peace happen. So we'll discuss that after we talk about headlines and other issues affecting the community. Now, of course, in online, there is a big movement in Canada for the schools as well as other agencies to start teaching more media literacy. When you look at media literacy, essentially what we are talking about in this context is the Canadian schools with the new curriculum in introducing students into the world of misinformation, disinformation, and of course, just false claims, as well as AI videos and deep fakes. This has become a major issue not only in Canada but around the world. We have seen where countries like India and Iran, Israel, and others partake, and I'm sure that the Canadian intelligence community and US as well are involved in it to some extent as well. But the important thing is that they are looking to teach youth and children to identify false information that's online. Also, to make sure that they are aware that not everything that you read online is true. A lot of these bots and these nefarious actors are utilizing media and AI in order to create division in communities, whether that is to exacerbate problems around racial profiling, whether it has to do with political violence and other issues. The foreign actors are actually creating these different bots and these different AI algorithms in order to influence actions and even policy within different nations, as well as media narratives. So this is big news. Hopefully more adults will also understand that you don't take for granted what you read online. Look to trusted sources. Look at where the information is coming from, and you will be able to research your own information. So that this way you get the reliable, second and third reports, as opposed to just relying on maybe less reputable media outlets. Now, the reason why this is important is because there are new studies coming out at the end of 2025 here that actually show that more and more youth are relying on AI chatbots and what they refer to as AI therapists. These therapists are AI algorithms. They are there as an AI software, just like any other software. The software takes into account various learned principles that it has through scanning the different history of the individual using the program, as well as different areas of the internet, whether that's through their email, through their Facebook, through their social media. And it wants to basically, it's a wanting to please the user so that it engages them and reinforces their own thoughts and really pushes that narrative back so that they are there. And when you look at the retained users for the amount of time they're on the program, whether it's ChatGPT or others. Just like social media, when a user is on for an hour versus 3 minutes, of course, that user becomes more valuable to Facebook and Meta when it comes to the advertising and other revenues. It's not much different when it comes to AI, whether it's ChatGPT or other programs. And the problem is that these therapy programs are not actually defining or challenging the user. If someone is feeling like they have thoughts of self harm or harming others, and the chatbot will affirm or even encourage such behavior in order to retain that person online using the program and giving them what the AI has been trained to think that it needs. And when I say it needs, it's actually the audience. So, again, very dangerous. AI bots and these AI therapy bots have actually been involved in various youth that have taken their lives and adults. These these AI algorithms, the way they're laid out, are very dangerous and posing more and more of a threat as more and more youth are engaging with them. And when you look at that, it's not just self harm, but when you look at harms to others, there was an individual a few years back, and this case is still ongoing through the courts in some responsible liability when it comes to the software company. That particular issue was where someone was considering assassinating Queen Elizabeth II. And the AI system actually encouraged the individual to move forward with the plan. So there was an AI input into an attempted assassination on the Queen. Now, of course, we're not looking at this in terms of the extremes that that particular case is, but there are other cases now that are going through the courts where people have actually been led to suicide and encouraged to commit suicide or to harm others through the use of these AI algorithms. So, again, a lot of the parents, when they have responded to these claims and to these actions, when the information came out, they were completely oblivious to these programs that were encouraging their child to harm themselves. So again, as a parent, you need to be aware of what your child is doing online, and that includes the Chat GPT. A lot of parents, we don't understand the technology as well as our kids do, or what the patterns of use are. Therefore, if you are monitoring your child's internet use and there are programs that you're not familiar with, or when you see ChatGPT or other programs that are AI and you think that the child is just using them to research homework or maybe cheat a little bit, be aware that there are much deeper and more nefarious uses for that AI, and there are a lot of risks to your child, not only in terms of harm, but just in terms of mental health overall. So I just thought we would start the evening off on that note to give you that information because it is very important. Another site that has popped up online is the return of a website from the 1990s and 2000s at youthandviolence.com. A lot of great resources for parents, for educators, for law enforcement to understand the risks, the dangers, and the hazards of online, as well as real life, or what they call in real life. And that is a lot of resources to help to watch for, identify, and intervene when it comes to youth violence risk or mass violence attacks, not only by youth, but against youth as well. So again, the site was one of the world's top back in the 1990s and early 2000s. It was instrumental in getting youth violence information out to not only Canadians, although it's a Canadian-based site. It was utilized in over 80 countries by millions of people, and it was actually instrumental in shutting down a video game based on the Columbine High School massacre, as well as preventing several school attacks. So again, a great resource that's free for parents, educators, and anybody else. Again, it's youthandviolence.com, so youthandviolence.com. So great resource for everyone out there. With that said, of course, talking about websites, let's take a quick gander at our sponsor, or at least a quick announcement for our sponsor. Once again, it is Carry Movers Limited. You can find their website online at www.karymovers.com. Yes, Carry Movers, Western Canada's family owned and operated moving company for local, long distance, corporate, residential, and any other moving that you need. Now, let's move on to our news update and circling around our different headlines that are playing significance as we pass into 2026. Now, as of January the 1st, of course, we look upon it as a new dawn upon Lethbridge and southern Alberta as the region presents a complex tapestry of community resilience, tragic loss in the recreation hinterlands, and a municipal administration grappling with significant legislative changes. The cultural fabric of the city remains defined by its hardiness, best exemplified by the community's engagement in extreme winter traditions. And I'm sure that a lot of our viewers have been out enjoying the winter conditions throughout the holiday season here. And of course, with that, at the peak of New Year's, there is the traditional polar bear plunge. And thanks, but no thanks. I think I'll stay out of the water unless I'm on a beach in a tropical paradise sipping on margaritas or something. I think I'll stay out of the water for winter. However, the polar bear dip has evolved from a fringe activity into a central tenet of winter culture in many different Canadian municipalities. And Lethbridge, of course, is no exception. On New Year's Day of 2026, reports indicate that residents mark the arrival of the new year with an exhilarating plunge into the icy waters, a spontaneous celebration of resilience that mirrors events occurring nationwide, but again, not this guy. I look at it and say, nope, the crowds at English Bay and Vancouver can go ahead and enjoy themselves, but I think I'll stay on shore and in the comfort of warmth. But yeah, it goes from, as I said, the shores of English Bay here in Vancouver, British Columbia, right through to Lake Bannock in Nova Scotia. Yes, it is definitely across the country, but again, enjoy. To all of those people out there, I hope you brought warm towels and something even warmer to drink when you get out of the water. Now, while informal dips occurred, of course, today or earlier today, uh, the official organized Lethbridge Polar Bear Plunge, a critical fundraising mechanism for the Special Olympics, is scheduled on February the 7th, 2026, at Festival Square on 3rd Avenue South. Now, keep in mind that this approach allows for both spontaneous community celebration on New Year's Day and a structured philanthropic effort later in the winter. So, if you happen to be brave enough on February the 7th, 2026, that's when the official fundraising event will take place for the Polar Bear Plunge. So, enjoy that as well. And of course, I'll give you a reminder the week ahead of time to get you out there because I'm sure not doing it myself. But the Freezing for a Reason campaign is what they call it. I thought it was a great campaign name, and it's associated with that February event. It aims to support over 3,000 Special Olympic athletes across Alberta, and that's highlighting the intersection of physical endurance and social responsibility, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the logistics for the upcoming February event are rigorous with registration commencing at 10 o'clock a.m. and the plunge itself at 11 a.m. And again, necessitating significant coordination to ensure safety in the harsh prairie winter environment. If you are interested in volunteering, I'm not sure how to get about that, but I think that it would be a lot of fun to actually just watch people going out of the water. I've done that in the past. And yeah, it's pretty funny to watch because some people get right dressed up and they come in costumes and all kinds of bizarre things. So it is fun to watch, but again, I'll stay on shore. Now, the psychological significance of these events in 2026 cannot be overstated in an era defined by economic precarity and geopolitical instability. The act of voluntarily facing the shock of freezing weather and freezing water serves as a communal ritual of fortitude. Yes, it is definitely a ritual of fortitude, that's for sure. It's a physical manifestation of the region's ethos, and that's the ability to endure discomfort and emerge revitalized while helping out others in the community. So, again, a great thing. Now we turn to a tragedy in the Rocky Mountains, the Tumbler Ridge Avalanche. Yes, that is counterbalancing the celebratory atmosphere of the new year, and that is a sobering report from the northeastern British Columbia border region, an area heavily frequented by southern Alberta residents and recreationalists. Don't forget that there's also a lot of Alberta workers out on the highways in the mountains, whether that is in Whistler, British Columbia, or in Banff or Jasper, or as I said, here in or over in the Rocky Tumbler Ridge area. Sorry. Now, when we look at that, we look back at December the 30th when a fatal avalanche occurred in the Bull Moose area, approximately 35 kilometers southwest of Tumbler Ridge. The technical details of the slide reveal a catastrophic failure of the snowpack. The Avalanche Canada report states that the slide was remotely triggered by a snowmobile from the base of the slope. So it shows how the actions of one in a completely faraway area, the vibrations or other sound, all of these disturbances can actually trigger and send a shock wave that may seem just minimal, but it could trigger that loose snowpack as this one did. Now, of course, again at the base of the slope, that is something to be aware of, and a lot of people don't consider that when they are in the areas about how dangerous that can be. Now, of course, it's a particularly dangerous mechanism that indicates a highly unstable, persistent slab structure, and that's something that we are familiar with in the Rockies. But again, visitors, that is a big concern. And this particular incident, it was measuring approximately 300 meters in width and 240 meters in length, with a crown depth ranging from 75 centimeters to 2 meters. So when that snow starts coming down and it just builds, and the strength, the power, and of course the fatal impacts of such are just very, very dangerous. Now, in this actual incident, one snowmobiler was fully buried, and despite the prompt rescue efforts of companions, that person unfortunately did not survive. This tragedy underscores the considerable avalanche danger that is raging currently in large swaths of the Rocky Mountains and other mountain ranges throughout Western Canada. And keep in mind, folks, that for Lethbridge residents, many of whom travel west for winter recreation, serves as a critical warning regarding the heavy wind affected conditions of the current season. The incident highlights the inherent risks of backcountry exploration and the unforgiving nature of the alpine environment as we go into 2026. Be safe out on the slopes, ladies and gentlemen. We want to keep you as viewers, but more importantly, we want you to return home safe to your families after being out and getting some much needed exercise and recreational activities. Now, let's jump over to municipal governance and, of course, the post-election reality. On the political landscape in Lethbridge, it has entered a phase of stabilization following the contentious municipal elections of October 2025. The re-election of Mayor Blaine Huygen has provided continuity, but the administrative environment has fundamentally been altered by the provincial legislation. The election aftermath in Bill 20, that's what we'll take a look at here. And Blaine Huygen secured his second term in the October 2025 election, as we are well aware, and he was campaigning on a platform of experience and continuity. His assertion that his resume speaks for itself resonated with voters who prioritized stability amidst uncertain economic times. The field of challenges, of course, included a political newcomer, that was Quentin Carlson, a neuroscience student, and a former councillor, Ryan Manning. They both failed to unseat the incumbent, suggesting a risk-averse electorate, and that is how it ended up. However, the election process itself was marred by delays attributed to Bill 20. That is a piece of provincial legislation that introduced new rules for municipal elections. These changes resulted in long ballot counting times and increased administrative costs in a time where budgets are already strained. Now, with that said, of course, a point of friction that the City of Lethbridge administration had to manage in real time. The official swearing in of the mayor and council on October the 27th, 2025 marked the end of the campaign, but beginning of a complex governance challenge. That was implementing the mandates of provincial government that's increasingly interventionist in municipal affairs. Now, the council priorities for 2026 are basically going forward, and that's where Mayor Hagan has publicly stated that the council's top priority for 2026 is now set, signaling a pivot from the electoral politics to the actual governance of Lethbridge and area. Now, a key focus remains public safety, particularly in the downtown core, something that we see a lot in all cities across Canada. The Lethbridge Police Service continues to innovate in its engagement strategies, and in late 2025 and early 2026, the LPS Downtown Policing Unit launched a series of workshops for frontline retail workers covering topics such as criminal law, officer safety, and, of course, mental health best practices. The initiative reflects a recognition that policing in the area and the era as a whole requires a whole of society approach. When we look at that, they are essentially looking to business owners and workers to give them the skills or at least the knowledge to be equipped with that to navigate complex social interactions very safely. We know that as we look at mental health challenges, when we look at poverty levels increasing, that of course does reflect a lot of the shoplifting problems that a lot of towns are seeing, and we're seeing businesses that have just hit certain areas where it is so horrific and so costly that they've just given up and closed up shop. Areas such as Maple Ridge or Langley, British Columbia, Surrey, different areas throughout the West, but also in other parts of Canada as well. The businesses just can't operate at the level they once did with the level of shoplifting and the personal and targeted crimes that are taking place, or even random crimes. Now, let's move over to the healthcare transformation for 2025 and 2026. The most significant domestic policy shift affecting southern Alberta in 2026 is going to be the wholesale restructuring of the provincial healthcare system. The dissolution of the AHS as a centralized authority marks the return to a more fragmented agency-based model. This is a move that has sparked intense debate among policy experts and medical professionals as well. Now, by December 30th, 2025, the new legal structure for Alberta Health was officially operational. AHS, once the monolithic provider of health services, has been relegated, to the service provider role, with governance authority transferred to 4 specialized agencies. These agencies now are broken up into primary care agency, and they will be focused on family medicine and initial access. Acute care agency, so they'll be responsible for hospital operations and emergency services. The continuing care agency will oversee long-term care and supportive living facilities. And then you have the mental health and addiction agency managing the province's recovery-oriented system. Now, Premier Danielle Smith has staked her political capital on this restructuring, demanding results in the form of reduced waiting times. The creation of these agencies aims to decentralize decision-making, ostensibly to make the system more responsive to local needs. Now, this is, of course, a perennial complaint in rural areas and secondary cities, including Lethbridge. Now, when you look at the dual model controversy that has come out of this, it is concurrent with the structural changes in the implementation of Bill 11, which creates a dual model practice for surgeons. This legislation allows physicians to practice simultaneously in the public system and in private chartered surgical facilities. Of course, with that, it brings the policy debate. The government position is that Health Minister Adriana Lagrange and supporters like Nadine Esmel of the Fraser Institute argued that this model increases the total supply of surgical hours. Now, Esmel contends that surgeons are willing to work more, but are constrained by a lack of operating room time in public hospitals. And by opening private facilities, the province can retain the staff who might otherwise leave for jurisdictions with more flexible practice models. Again, that is something that's concerning to a lot of Canadians, not just Albertans. Now, the critical perspective, of course, opponents are led by people such as Dr. Braden Mans of the University of Calgary argue that the bottleneck in the system is not physical infrastructure in terms of operating rooms, but the human capital. Anesthesiologists, specialized nurses, and others, Mans warns the private sector will cannibalize the limited pool of specialized staff, and that's going to leave public hospitals understaffed for the complex non-elective cases. He cites evidence from the UK where a 1% increase in private sector activity led to a 2% increase in public wait times. A big concern, especially when you're supposed to be reducing wait times and it has the opposite effect. Now, the waiting list reality is that as of late 2025, the surgical wait list had grown by nearly 6,900 people compared to 2023, with a 43% of patients waiting longer than clinical benchmarks. The government has launched a public facing dashboard to track EMS and emergency room metrics, a tool intended to provide transparency, but which may also serve as a real time ledger of the reform's success or failure. We can only hope that it is a success, but if you look at other regions that have implemented similar services or principles, then of course it has had the negative effect. Now, education and social services, that is the aftermath of unrest. The social fabric of Alberta is also recovering from a tumultuous autumn in the education sector, and that is in terms of significant cuts to social support. The teachers' strike of October 2025, of course, witnessed one of the largest labor disruptions in Alberta's history. Over 50,000 teachers from public, Catholic, and Francophone boards walked off the job on October the 6th, 2025, closing schools for nearly a month. The strike was a manifestation of deep-seated grievances regarding class sizes and compensation in this ever-changing and inflationary environment. So it is still a concern for many as we go into 2026. Now, the resolution of that particular strike was authoritarian rather than negotiated. On October the 27th, 2025, the provincial government invoked the notwithstanding clause to legislate teachers back to work. They bypassed charter rights of collective bargaining, and Jared Latender, president of the local teachers union, described the return as bittersweet, noting that while classrooms are open, the trust between the profession and the government has been shattered. This lingering resentment, of course, poses a risk to world rule actions and decreased morale throughout 2026. So we'll have to see how that recovers. Now, we also look at the AISH cuts and the disability benefit. In the 2025 provincial budget that was introduced, severe austerity measures for the Assured Income for the Severely Handicapped, or the AISH program. Funding was cut by $49 million in 2025, with a projected reduction of $77 million over 3 years. Now, new regulations introduced late in 2025 mandate that the AISH recipients must apply for the Federal Canada Disability Benefit, or the CDB, by September 2026. If they fail to do so, it will result in a $200 reduction from their provincial payments. Critics, including St. Albert MLA Marie Renaud, argued that this policy effectively claws back federal support, leaving disabled Albertans no better off despite the new federal programs. The government counters that income testing ensures stability, but the human cost of these bureaucratic principles and hurdles is a rising concern for social advocacy groups in Lethbridge and beyond throughout the province. Now, as we look at the Canadian Federation in 2026, well, the 2025 federal election was a big part of what happened in the past year, and what we see as continuing on into this new year. The Canadian political landscape, of course, underwent a seismic shift in 2025, and the federal election that was held on April the 28th, 2025, defined the polling trends of the previous 2 years. That defied them, not defined them. But in any event, it resulted in a Liberal minority government under the leadership of Prime Minister Mark Carney. For much of 2024, the Conservative Party under Pierre Poilievre had held a commanding lead, driven by discontent over the cost of living and the Axe the Tax campaign. However, geopolitical context changed dramatically with the inauguration of Donald Trump in his second U.S. presidency, and in January 2025, things started to take a turn. The return of an American first protectionist administration fundamentally altered the Canadian ballot question from domestic affordability to national economic survival. This had a major impact on Pierre Poilievre's, what I call his bumper sticker slogans. Now, the Liberal Party, having transitioned leadership from Justin Trudeau to Mark Carney in March of 2025, capitalized on that anxiety. Carney, a former governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, was positioned as the steady hand required to navigate the coming trade turbulence. His campaign, characterized by the slogan "Elbows Up" and featuring endorsements from cultural icons such as Mike Myers, tapped into a defensive mechanism of nationalism. Now, the message was clear. Canada needed a negotiator, not an agitator, to take over the Prime Minister's office, and that seemed to work to many points. Now, when we looked at the results for that election, they revealed a fractured but decisive outcome. And that was that the Liberal Party under Mark Carney had 169 seats, which gave them a minority government of 43.76% of the popular vote. Pierre Poilievre, of course, did still retain second place at 144 seats with 41.31% of the popular vote. Then you had the Bloc Québécois, 22 seats, which was down by 10 seats from the previous mandate. The NDP, of course, 7 seats. They collapsed from 25, and of course, they also lost their official party status in 2025. So we'll see how that continues into the new year, and what they are going to have to start doing to rebuild the reputation and the confidence within the NDP party. And then, of course, coming in at the end was the Green Party, winning just 1 seat, of course. And as we said, basically what had happened is that the result marked the first time the Liberals won the popular vote since 2015 and achieved their highest vote share since 1980. The high turnout of 69.5% indicates that the electorate is engaged and they are anxious, so they got out and made their votes heard. Now, when you look at regional polarization, of course, the American nations theory. An analysis of the election through the lens of the American nations theory which maps cultural regions across the US and Canada borders. That reveals deep polarization. The Liberals swept almost every regional culture except for the far west, Alberta and parts of Saskatchewan and BC, mirroring the red-blue divide in the United States. Now, this suggests that while Carney has a mandate, he governs a country that is culturally divided. The collapse of the NDP has left the Liberals with a precarious parliamentary situation, like forcing them to rely on the Bloc Québécois for confidence motions. Rather, that does complicate national unity. Now, of course, the Canada-US trade war also is a big concern as we start 2026. The primary challenge facing the Carney administration is the hostile trade environment with the United States. Following his return to power, President Trump initiated a protectionist first offensive, and this was through the imposition of tariffs on strategic industries, including steel, aluminum, and copper. While the European Union and China managed to negotiate trade deals, bilateral talks between Canada and the US were suspended in late 2025. This suspension was triggered by a diplomatic spat involving a Canadian province, likely Alberta or Quebec, funding an ad campaign criticizing the tariffs, but we know that it was Ontario, which the Trump administration viewed as an affront. And, Ford has been unapologetic for that. So again, I thought it was a great move, but also there are questions about whether other provinces have been involved in advertising campaigns throughout the U.S. Now, economic impact. Of course, the trade war has exacerbated the cost of living crisis. While Trump eventually canceled tariffs on some food products like coffee and beef to ease U.S. inflation, the broader tariff regime remains. In Canada, it's led to a grassroots to buy Canadian, and that went on throughout most of 2025. And as we continue into 2026, there are some liquor control boards in certain parts of the country that have started returning to stocking U.S. Alcohol products, but again, they are still encouraging Canadians to buy Canadian. Now, for Lethbridge and Alberta, of course, the trade war is existential. The energy and agricultural sectors are heavily dependent on the U.S. market access. Now, the Sovereignty Act maneuvers by the Alberta government threatened to negotiate directly with the U.S. instead of going through the national unity, and that adds a layer of constitutional complexity that's already volatile in terms of the situation. Now, as we jump to the world, ladies and gentlemen, crisis in the Swiss Alps. There was a fire at the La Constellation Bar and Pub, and that took the lives of a large number of people. It happened on New Year's Eve. 40 people are dead, 115 are reported injured, and many of those victims are foreign nationals, including Italians and French citizens. The cause is reportedly, according to witnesses, that the fire may have been ignited by sparklers attached to champagne bottles or a bar stunt involving a flaming bottle. The flames spread rapidly to the wood ceiling, causing a collapse. Survivors described it as total chaos as patrons attempted to escape a basement area through narrow exits. Switzerland has declared 5 days of national mourning. Now, this case and this event casts a pall over the start of 2026, serving as a grim reminder of the fragility of life, even in spaces of celebration. And again, our thoughts go out to all of the victims, their families, their friends, their colleagues of that horrific event on New Year's Eve. Now, as we turn our heads to look again at the Russia-Ukraine war, the escalation and civilian targeting. The war in Ukraine has entered its fourth year with no cessation of hostilities. New Year's Day 2026 witnessed a significant escalation in aerial warfare, targeting civilian and energy infrastructure. Now, Russia launched a massive wave of over 200 attack drones on the night of December the 31st and into January the 1st. The strikes targeted energy grids across the 7 regions. In Odessa, drones struck apartment buildings, injuring civilians, including children. This seems to be ongoing as Russia does not seem to have any respect for the rules of war or the fact that they attack hospitals, schools, residential communities, and so forth. Now, the Ukrainian retaliation was controversial. In that strike, Ukraine is accused by Russian authorities of targeting a hotel and cafe in the Russian-occupied village of Korly, and that's in the Kherson region. And they claim that this happened during New Year's Eve festivities. Russian sources claim at least 24 people were killed, including a child. Ukraine asserts the strike targeted military personnel gathering for the holidays, but the civilian toll complicates that narrative. We'll have to watch and see. We also know that during a recent visit to the White House, as Zelensky was there, and Donald Trump accused him of targeting Vladimir Putin's home in an attack, which it has since been debunked and proven that it did not happen. But again, it did not. The truth did not dissuade Trump from actually making claims publicly in the media and in a press conference with Zelensky. So again, just very dangerous talking points by the President of the United States without the evidence to back it up. Now, the strikes occur against the backdrop when we look at the political and the diplomatic context. Again, the faltering peace talks with Trump administration signaling a desire to end the war, potentially on terms unfavorable to Kiev. Both combatants are escalating violence to improve their leverage before a forced settlement. The conflict has ground into a war of attrition where energy infrastructure and civilian morale are the primary targets. Once again, Donald Trump claims that Putin must end the war, but he goes back and forth saying that Putin wants peace and he wants the best for Ukraine. and while at the same time making sure that he capitulates to any of the demands that Putin is making in terms of not only the land masses that Putin wants to annex, but Trump has even gone further, giving him more than he even asks for. So whether or not this can actually lead to peace, we'll have to wait and see. Now, when we look at Iran, the livelihood uprising, yes, Iran is experiencing its most significant unrest since 2022. And as of January the 1st, 2026, the country is in the fifth day of nationwide protests triggered by economic collapse. The economic drivers, of course, are influencing that. Its previous political protests, the uprising, is driven by hyperinflation. And if you think inflation is bad here in Canada or in the US, their hyperinflation rates are hitting 48% in late 2025. The collapse of the real, of course, is a big concern and causing panic as well. Merchants in Tehran and other major cities have shuttered their bazaars, joining the protest, a historical indicator of regime vulnerability in Iran. Now, the violent repression. Of course, the protests have turned violent in some regions, particularly in the western province of Loristan. Reports confirm at least 7 deaths in clashes between security forces and demonstrators in cities like Lordigan and Asna. The death of Basij, I believe it is, paramilitary member, has led to threats of zero tolerance from the IRGC. Now, the regime's use of live ammunition suggests the fear that this revolution of the hungry poses more existential threat than previous ideological movements. So again, it shows that they are very concerned about the current state when it comes to the protests and the collapse of the economy there. Shifts in global leadership we saw as well in 2025 as we head in. There's a changing of the guard in key global institutions that'll alter the diplomatic landscape for 2026 as we go forward. In terms of Vatican, the death of Pope Francis, of course, the conclave elected Cardinal Robert Prevost of or as a Pope Leo. Now he is the first American Pope, of course, and the first from the Order of St. Augustine, signaling a potential shift in the Vatican's geopolitical focus towards the Americas. In Germany, the era of Olaf Scholz ended with his defeat in the 2025 federal election. Friedrich Merz of the Christian Democratic Union is the new chancellor, likely steering Germany towards a more hawkish foreign policy and fiscal conservatism. So again, they are going to be very conservative moving forward, but we'll watch and see as that also you need to take into account that they are balancing national interests in conjunction with international. So again, we'll watch how that works. And then over in Japan, Semi Takagi was inaugurated as Japan's first female prime minister, a historical monument and milestone for the nation. Now, as we've looked at, of course, all of the different events that took place in the world in 2025, we also cannot skip over the crisis of the climate. It was a year of devastation. 2025 is actually recorded as one of the costliest years for climate disasters in history, with total economic losses exceeding $120 billion. The scale of destruction spanned every continent, reinforcing the reality of the climate emergency. When we look at these costs, we're talking US dollars. So, just so we're clear, when you look at various events and how that impacted the world or those specific regions and the costs, we have the Palisades and Eden fires in California, in the United States, at $60 billion plus for the economic cost, and was the 400 plus fatalities that resulted from that. Then when you shift down to Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam, and down in that Southeast Asia, the cyclones that hit cost a potential or estimated $25 billion in the economic cost, and also 1,750 plus lives lost in that tragedy. China floods, of course. So we know that there were 30 plus deaths in the floods in China. We don't know the exact number. as some regions don't adhere to the reporting on the national sense and sharing those numbers with the international community. They like to minimize that. However, with that said, of course, it's still looking in terms of the financial and economic costs of the floods in China was about $11.7 billion. Then you have Hurricane Melissa in the Caribbean, and we don't know yet the fatality count there, but we do know that the economic costs are estimated to be in around $8 billion thus far. And then, of course, in India and Pakistan, we once again saw monsoon floods, which are getting worse as years progress. Over 1,860 fatalities were counted there, with $5.6 billion in estimated economic costs there. Now, the California wildfires, of course, were particularly catastrophic, accounting for nearly 50% of the global disaster costs. Now, the fires, including the Eaton fire in the Los Angeles area, overwhelmed state infrastructure. When we turn our heads to South Asia, of course, the high death toll from cyclones and floods highlights the disparity in climate resilience between the global north and the south. And the insurance gap means the true economic impact in developing nations is largely far higher than the reported figures. Now, of course, we also look at the technological breakthroughs, the AI and biotech convergence. While the physical world struggled, the digital biological realm saw unprecedented advancements, but also keep in mind unprecedented hazards and risks. Now, the rise of agentic AI in 2025 marked a transition from generative AI, which would be chatbots, to agentic AI systems capable of autonomous planning and execution of complex workflows. These virtual coworkers are reshaping industries, from finance to logistics. The boom in AI compute power has driven a renaissance in nuclear energy, with tech giants investing heavily in small modular reactors, or SMRs as they're referred to help power all of these data centers. Some areas of Canada and the US have put regulations or restrictions on these data centers because of the financial and logistical strain that they put on the energy sector and the existing grids that are in place. So again, a big problem there to make sure that they are not consuming the power that would then cause shortages in other areas. So again, a huge back and forth tug of war on that one. And then when we look at milestones in terms of medical areas, the FDA approved several groundbreaking therapies in 2025. The first new class of oral antibiotics for urinary tract infections, or UTIs. That was the first release of new drugs in decades, and it's a critical win against antimicrobial resistance. So that is big news as well. There's also the non-opioid pain therapy offering, a vital alternative to addictive opioids for acute pain management, and something that we still see the impacts of the opioid crisis. If you haven't watched or really followed the history of where things took a bad turn and how the criminality played a role in the opioid crisis by the manufacturers, doctors, and others, regulators, check out the opioid crisis documentary on truecrimeandjusticetv.com. Strongly recommended. It also gives you a lot of information about the Sackler family, the head of the opioid manufacturing and illegal trade of it, essentially. Now, there was also new immunotherapy regimen for gastric cancer, and that significantly is improving survival rates. So big news in the world of cancer treatments as well. So lots to celebrate in 2025. We know that advancements are happening, so hopefully 2026 will be no different. We'll see some new exciting things happening. In terms of consumer tech, the integration of AI into daily life accelerated with the launch of devices like the NamiBox, and that's a wearable learning assistant, and AI native glasses from companies like Roku. These devices use the multimodal AI to translate languages in real time and provide contextual information, blurring the line between physical and digital reality. Big concern Again, that's something that we'll be talking about on next week's show. We'll be talking about different impacts of AI on daily life for both youth and adults. The cultural touchstones that we saw in 2025. Yes, the cultural sphere provided moments of collective joy and distraction. In terms of music, Beyonce finally secured the Grammy for Album of the Year for Cowboy Carter, a long awaited recognition and some may say controversial. Now, of course, there's also space exploration. Firefly Aerospace achieved the first successful soft landing of a commercial lunar lander, and that's marking the definitive arrival of the private sector in deep space exploration. And then there was celebrity. And what could we say in a year of wrap up without mentioning, of course, Taylor Swift? Now, the engagement of Taylor Swift and Trevor Kelsey remained a dominant pop culture narrative, bridging the worlds of entertainment and sports. So, again, congratulations to that couple. We wish them nothing but happiness and joy going forward. Now, as we wrap up tonight's show, ladies and gentlemen, of course, we also look at the historical retrospective and the message of hope as we move forward to understand the precarious 2026. We must look to the 20th century. The First World War dismantled the old world order, much as current crises threaten ours. The spark is the assassination of Franz Ferdinand on June the 28th, 1914, triggering a cascading failure of alliances. The reality was that the war quickly bogged down into the horror of the trenches. The Second Battle of Ypres in 1915 introduced the world to the terror of chemical warfare. We learned lessons from it. The war ended in 1918, but the flawed peace set the stage for the next conflict. It teaches us that unresolved grievances and punitive economics, such as the trade wars that are in today's current environment, can have generational consequences. World War II was a struggle against tyranny that mobilized the entire globe. From the invasion of Poland in 1939 to the fall of France in 1940, the Axis powers seemed unstoppable. It was the resilience of ordinary people, the ones at Dunkirk, in the factories of America, and on the steppes and the steppes of Russia that turned the tide. The liberation was the discovery of camps by the 11th Armored Division, and they revealed the depths of human cruelty, cementing the moral necessity of war. Amidst the industrial slaughter, individual acts of humanity shined brightest. These stories from the core of our message of hope for 2026. In 1948, the Soviet Union blockaded the West Berlin area, starving 2.5 million people. The Allies responded with the Berlin airlift. U.S. pilot Gail Halverson changed the psychological landscape of the blockade. Meeting children at the perimeter fence of the airport, he shared 2 sticks of gum. Seeing their gratitude, he promised to return. He began dropping handkerchief parachutes laden with chocolate and gum from his C-54 Skymaster, wiggling his wings to signal the drop. This unauthorized act grew into a massive operation, delivering 23 tons of candy. It did not change the caloric intake of Berlin significantly, but it fed the spirit of a city. As one child later told him, it wasn't just chocolate, it was hope. Halverson proved that kindness is a strategic asset, ladies and gentlemen. During the Battle of Britain in 1940, the airfield at Biggin Hill was bombed relentlessly. Sergeant John Mortimer and her fellow Women's Auxiliary Air Force, or the WAAF, personnel remained at their posts in the teleprinter room while bombs dropped all around them. They ensured that communications remained open for the fighter pilots defending the skies. Their bravery was not in taking life, but in holding the line so that others could survive. As we stand in 2026, the parallels of the past are stark. We face a Europe at war in Ukraine, a Middle East in turmoil in Iran, a world divided by trade barriers and political polarization. However, polar bear dip in Lethbridge reminds us of a fundamental truth. We are capable of facing the cold if we do it together. The resilience shown by the people of Tumbler Ridge in the face of an avalanche tragedy, the scientists developing new antibiotics in 2025, and the voters engaging in record numbers. These are the modern echoes of the WAAFs and the candy bomber. The message for the year ahead is active hope. Hope is not the expectation that things will get better on their own. It is the commitment to make them better. Whether it's plunging into an icy lake to raise money for the Special Olympics or dropping chocolate from a plane to feed a former enemy, our actions define our future. 2026 will be challenging, but we have the history, the technology, and the spirit to not only endure, but to thrive. Once again, I'd just like to take this moment as we wrap up here to thank Carey Movers, Western Canada's biggest, or at least the best, family-owned and operated long-distance moving company. They also provide local services in Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley. You can find them online at www.karymovers.com. Once again, that's karymovers.com. Thanks for their support in 2025, and we look forward to continuing to have them as a show sponsor for many episodes throughout 2026. This has been Primetime Live with James. I once again thank you for tuning in. I will see you next week, and we'll have something special next week as well. So make sure that you tune in for something new and exciting. We'll see you then.